This is John Black, Super Chemist. This video here is Buck Angel on YouTube if you want to watch the whole thing.
Are sex change experiments that forcibly transition mice, rats, and monkeys necessary for science? Good afternoon. Late last year, the White Coat Waste Project exposed more than $10 million in taxpayer funds that were spent creating transgender mice, rats, and monkeys. These DEI grants funded painful and deadly transgender experiments that forced lab animals to undergo invasive surgeries and hormone therapies at universities across the country. For example, the Biden-Harris administration spent $2.5 million taxpayer dollars to study the fertility of transgender mice.
I did a little research on this, and it's happening. It's actually happening. So, wow, I'm just so bummed. I really am. I'm embarrassed, honestly, to be trans, whatever that means. Like, at this point, first off, I will say that in my heart, I'm against using animals for testing. I am, but I'm also wondering, like, do we have to do these things in order to move forward? I mean, it's a very nuanced space. It is. I do not think torturing animals is okay, and I do think experimenting on animals is kind of gross. But, there is that thing. How do we find cures for things? Do we experiment on people? Is that more humane on some level because a human can consent to it, or animals can't consent to any of this? So, and also, hey, where are all the trans vegans? Where are all the trans vegans? Are you all going to call this out, trans vegans? Are you going to side with trans? Or are you going to side with vegans? And you're going to side with animal rights? This is going to be very interesting. So let's move forward in this. Thanks again for liking, subscribing, joining this channel. It means everything in the world to me. So let's get in. This is just actually absurd. Absurd.
Let that sink in. We spent over $2 million studying the fertility of transgender mice. $1.1 million was spent to find out if female rats receiving testosterone therapies to mimic transgender men were more likely to overdose on a party drug, commonly used in the LGBTQ community to induce drug-fueled what's called, quote, chemsex. I asked my staff what was chemsex and the chemical, and I guess it's something called GHB, which is a date rape drug, and also a drug that's used recreationally.
So there's something about this that's bothering me, because she's saying that it's to the people they're giving testosterone to find out if they'll overdose on. So it's actually, trans men aren't using party drugs like that. I'm telling you, I know what's happening there. That's more of a gay male scene, to be honest with you. So I'm a little leery on what that's happening there, but I'm gonna say that they might be investigating this and coming up with the sort of notes that these people are writing. But my mind is spinning right now, because I'm like, what is happening? Who's justifying these testing, and why does that matter on some level when it comes to transition? This is a part of transitioning. That's a whole other segment of the community and of the LGBT community. Drug usage, sex, all of the unprotectedness, all of this stuff. So I'm actually speechless, as you can see, because why are we testing if giving females testosterone enhances drug usage and what are you talking about? Why would that even be part of the testing? Aren't you supposed to be torturing these animals to figure out whether or not testosterone is going to help a female who wants to live as a male on their health? Like, shouldn't you be testing what happens to the heart, the lungs, the genitals, all those things? Why are you testing what drugs have to do with it? This is why I'm telling you that whole trans liberal insanity has gone off the deep end. It's just weird to me, the whole thing. Okay, listen more.
So we spent over $1 million to find out if female rats receiving testosterone therapy were more likely to overdose on a date rape drug.
What?
Like, that's what your taxpayer dollars were being spent on. Federal funds were also used to forcibly transition male monkeys to see if hormone therapy made them more susceptible to HIV. Now, I didn't know this until recently, but monkeys cannot be infected with HIV. Yet this federally funded experiment forced them to take hormone-altering drugs to study a virus
Wow.
they cannot have.
They cannot have.
The Biden-Harris administration was so eager to propagate their radical gender ideology across all facets of American society that they were surgically mutating animal genitals, like taxpayer money.
But that being said, what is it that's going to help me as a trans? Should have already, first of all, been using all the amount of people that you put on testosterone, and you should be keeping a log of all the vaginal atrophy that's been happening, the liver disease that's been happening, the high blood pressure, the depression, what's happening with the heart. Do you think that they were even keeping any kind of statistics? No, none of it. No. So why are you using animals to do this? It's gross.
Went to that. So my question is, were they castrating mice, castrating monkeys? Were they getting double mastectomies?
Wow.
The language that they used in many of these experiments were, quote, gender-affirming care, which I learned about 3 years ago what that meant. I thought that was maybe just some hormones or something something like that, but apparently gender-affirming care is actually surgical mutilation of genitals, and apparently it's not just humans they're doing it to. We were doing it with taxpayer dollars to animals. It's well known that because of the differences between animal and human biology, animal testing frequently does not produce results relevant for humans. In fact, 90% of novel drugs that are successful in animal tests fail in human clinical trials. It's well known that because of the differences between animal and human biology, animal testing frequently does not produce results relevant for humans. In fact, 90% of novel drugs that are successful in animal tests fail in human clinical trials. Today's scientific questions are so complex that we have well surpassed a time where it is useful or appropriate to rely on inhumane animal experiments to answer them. Recently developed technological tools can more accurately model human biology and identify solutions that are more useful for human patients. But it is thank you all for being here today. I will now recognize myself for 5 minutes of questioning. Mr. Goodman, in your written statement, you state the White Coat Waste Project identified at least $10 million in NIH grants for transgender animal experiments. You state that 95% of the funding came from Dr. Fauci's NIAID. Why is the federal government spending taxpayer dollars to create transgender animals?
It's a great question.
Your microphone.
Thank you. It's a great question. I mean, I wonder why they're making cats constipated also. It's a question that rings around in my head at night when I'm going to bed, why we're funding these things. A lot of the programs that are funded do latch on to some type of social trend, and then animal experimenters use it as a money grab, as an excuse to get NIH tax funds from some, in this case, DEI grants were used to fund a lot of this stuff. So people who abuse animals find some kind of excuse to bring in new money, and they'll switch their research program over to something that's trendy to bring tax dollars into their university. I mean, that's part of the big problem here, is that colleges and universities are taking 25 to 40% off the top of every single one of these grants for indirect costs that go into a slush fund that has nothing to do with the research. So they're willing to let experimenters do whatever they want to animals to keep the money flowing in.
Some people might describe that as money laundering.
The thing I just got from that was money. It's about money. It's always about money. So they don't care about little kids. They don't care about destroying 16-year-old girls, shoving testosterone, making it accessible so easily to them, where they're just destroying their bodies over it. It's literally, he said, it's about trends. They go with trends.
All right, are sex change experiments that forcibly transition mice, rats, and monkeys necessary for science?
Absolutely not.
Buckmaster has expressed frustration that people don't understand the trade-off that scientists face when using animals in research. I'd like to know what that trade-off is. And then, return to investment. Justin Goodman, the vice president of WCW, has said that the return of investment for taxpayers is poor. Now, think about this. Do you think taxpayers should be funding this kind of research, transgender animal research, okay? And why do you think that, and why do you not think that? Do you think it's up to the government to make sure that transgender people have proper health care, or do you think it's up to the actual community and organizations like WPATH and all to fund their own research? And what kind of research should be funded by the government, and what kind?
No research should be the government isn't there to research stuff. That's what charities are for. You want a corrupt government? Then make your government be a charity fund. You want your government not to be corrupt? Then don't make it into a charity fund.
Kind of research should not be funded by the government, okay? Before we go, WCW's goals are cut funding. WCW's goals is to cut government funding for animal experiments. Number 2, improve transparency. WCW's goals is to improve transparency around animal experiments. And number 3, retire animals. WCW's goal is to retire animals used in experiments to loving homes. I don't see any issue with that at all. And I actually think that it's actually where I stand as well. And then I wanted to show you this. It says, no, monkeys are not susceptible to HIV, but they can be infected with a similar called SIV, which is similar to HIV, but it's not HIV. It's similar, okay? And they do use monkeys to experiment with HIV. Monkeys are used in HIV/AIDS research because they can be infected with SIV, which is not HIV. It's similar. Researchers study SIV-infected monkeys to learn more about AIDS in humans and how to prevent it. So it is shocking to me that they are using animals to research for transgender. It's not even, in some level to me, transgender medicine, because what does a monkey have to do with me?
It's well known that because of the differences between animal and human biology, animal testing frequently does not produce results relevant for humans. In fact, 90% of novel drugs that are successful in animal tests fail in human clinical trials.
And also, they aren't really, you have to look at the history of trans people, and that's where you need to start. And I don't think that they have been doing this in this whole years of giving young people testosterone and all the side effects that have been happening. And we don't even know what the long-term effects is going to happen for a lot of these people, because this has just started. So in my opinion, I do not think we should be using animals to test for trans, because it doesn't make any sense to me at all. 0 sense at all. And I feel like this is something that has been hidden from us, who are taxpayers, and also from the trans community, because I had no idea. I had 0 idea that this was happening.
17 females identifying as trans skyrocketed in comparison to males. I have talked about this on my channel before, and now enough time has passed. We are finally seeing the effects of it all. Thousands of women all over the internet are now coming out, raising their voices about being detransitioned. They're making videos, they're writing articles. So why is this all happening, and why are the more woke trans activists insistent on hiding this all? Here are my thoughts. More people are coming out as trans because the meaning of what trans is has changed. At one time, a transgender meant somebody that lived full-time as the opposite sex without necessarily going physically through the transition. Man to woman, woman to man. Now it's such a broad definition that every single gay and lesbian alive fits it. By the way, this is not some random source. This is the American Psychological Association. Ready for this? Transgender, an adjective that is an umbrella term used to describe the full range of people whose gender identity and or gender role do not conform to what is typically associated with their sex assigned at birth. So, what that means to me, as a lesbian, I'm a woman who dates women, I am not conforming to gender roles as a woman because I'm expected as a female person, woman person, I'm expected to date men. So therefore, I'm not conforming to gender roles, so therefore I am trans? No. And number 2, overwhelmingly overdiagnosing of people with gender dysphoria, known as rapid onset gender dysphoria, because doctors are afraid of being called transphobic. Yes, that is a thing we are talking about in 2020. Since its formation in October, more than 300 women who regret transitioning from female to trans male have come forward for support and advice. In the UK, during the last 10 years, there has been a 3,200% rise in children who believe they have gender dysphoria.
3,200%. Keep in mind, 100% increase would be doubling it. 200% would be, you know what I mean? You're tripling it. We're talking about 3,200%.